For 6 months, nobody at Sullivan Technologies knew that the quiet night janitor mopping their floors was actually William Sullivan, the billionaire CEO who had built the company from nothing 25 years ago, while executives rushed past him without a second glance, while managers complained about him within earshot, while his own daughter walked by him in the hallways without recognition. William was learning truths about his company that would change everything. What he discovered during those 6 months would expose corruption at the highest levels, reveal heroes hiding in plain sight, and teach him the most important lesson of his life, a lesson his late wife had tried to tell him before she died. This is the story of a man who had everything, lost what mattered most, and found himself again in the most unexpected place, at the bottom of his own company. Some lessons can only be learned when you're invisible, and William Sullivan was about to learn them all. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments below. It's amazing to see our community growing across the globe, and if this story resonates with you, if you believe that character is revealed in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, hit that subscribe button. You're about to hear a story that will change how you see the people around you. William Sullivan had built Sullivan Technologies from a startup in his garage to a company worth $2.3 billion. At 52 years old, he should have been celebrating. Instead, he was standing in his empty penthouse at 2 in the morning, holding his wife Catherine's favorite coffee mug, trying to remember the last real conversation they'd had before the cancer took her 6 months ago. The penthouse overlooked downtown Seattle, floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble floors, original artwork that cost more than most people's houses. None of it mattered. Catherine was gone, and in the silence of their beautiful empty home, William was finally hearing things she'd tried to tell him for years. "You've built an empire, William," she'd said during one of their last conversations, her voice weak, but her eyes still sharp. "But do you actually know the people who helped you build it? Not the executives, not the board members, the real people. The ones who keep the lights on and the floors clean and the coffee fresh every morning?" He'd dismissed it then, assured her he was a good CEO, that he valued everyone, but Catherine had just smiled sadly and squeezed his hand. "You see titles, my love. You don't see people." Those words haunted him now, because looking back at 25 years of building Sullivan Technologies, William realized he couldn't name a single person outside the executive floor. Not one janitor, not one cafeteria worker, not one maintenance technician. They were invisible to him, and he'd never even noticed. His daughter Emily had moved to Boston after the funeral. She'd stood at Catherine's grave and said something that cut even deeper. "Mom spent her whole life trying to teach you that success isn't measured in stock prices, Dad. I don't think you ever learned that lesson." She was right. And sitting in that empty penthouse, surrounded by the material success he'd spent decades accumulating, William made a decision that would change everything. He was going to learn the lesson Catherine had tried to teach him. He was going to see the invisible people in his own company, but not as the CEO, not from the top floor. He was going to start at the bottom. 2 weeks later, William Sullivan legally changed his appearance. He grew out his beard, let his hair gray naturally without the expensive dye treatments, got a pair of cheap glasses from the drugstore. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Perfect. He created a new identity. Michael Chen, 50 years old, recently widowed, looking for night custodial work. The background check would hold up. He'd made sure of it. No connection to William Sullivan, no digital footprint that would raise questions. Just another person looking for honest work to pay the bills. His CFO, David Harrison, thought he was taking an extended grief leave. The board thought he was traveling. Only his lawyer knew the truth, and even he thought William was losing his mind. "You're going to work as a janitor in your own company?" Robert had asked, incredulous. "William, this is insane." "Maybe," William had replied. But my wife spent 25 years trying to show me something I was too blind to see. I'm not going to waste the time I have left being blind. On a Monday night in September, Michael Chen showed up for his first shift as a night janitor at Sullivan Technologies. The woman training him was Rosa Martinez, 62 years old, who'd worked at the company for 18 years. She had kind eyes, patient hands, and the sort of gentle authority that came from years of teaching new people how to do an honest job well. "You ever done custodial work before, Michael?" she asked, handing him a uniform shirt that smelled like industrial detergent. "No, ma'am," William said, and it felt strange speaking in the slightly rougher accent he'd practiced. "But I'm a quick learner, and I need the work." Rosa nodded, understanding in her expression. "And we all need the work, honey. Come on, I'll show you how Mr. Sullivan likes things done around here." The irony wasn't lost on William. For the next 3 hours, Rosa taught him how to properly clean the offices he'd walked through thousands of times without ever wondering who kept them spotless, how to strip and wax floors, how to empty trash without making noise that would disturb the late-working employees, how to clean bathrooms until they sparkled, how to handle the industrial cleaning chemicals safely. "You'll mostly work alone," Rosa explained, showing him the supply closet on the 7th floor. "Night shift is you, me, and 2 other guys. Carlos does floors 1 through 5. Jimmy does the executive floors, 12 through 15. You'll handle 6 through 11 once you're trained." "What about you?" William asked. Rosa smiled. "I'm the supervisor. I float between floors, make sure supplies are stocked, help where needed, and I handle the special requests." Special requests. Executive floor throws a lot of late meetings. Sometimes they need coffee service. Sometimes they need conference rooms prepared on short notice. Mr. Harrison, he's the CFO. He's particular about how he likes his office cleaned. Rosa's expression flickered for just a moment, something William couldn't quite read. Very particular. Over the next 2 weeks, William learned more about Sullivan Technologies than he'd learned in 25 years as CEO. He learned it from the bottom up, 1 floor at a time, through the eyes of the people he'd never really seen. He learned that Carlos had a degree in mechanical engineering from Venezuela that wasn't recognized in the United States, that he cleaned floors at night and drove for a rideshare service during the day to support his wife and 3 kids, that he'd applied for engineering positions at Sullivan Technologies 4 times and been rejected each time because his degree wasn't from an American university. "I designed water filtration systems that served 50,000 people back home," Carlos told him one night, both of them eating lunch at 3 in the morning in the break room. "Here, I clean the floors where engineers work. It's okay. It's honest. But sometimes..." He trailed off, staring at his sandwich. "Sometimes I see the problems they're trying to solve, and I know the answer. But who would listen to the janitor?" William learned that Jimmy, who cleaned the executive floors, had been saving for 10 years to buy his daughter the viola she needed for her high school orchestra, that the instrument cost $2,000, that Jimmy made $14 an hour and sent most of it back to the Philippines to support his extended family, that his daughter, brilliant and talented, was playing a borrowed instrument with a crack in it because Jimmy couldn't afford both the viola and his mother's medical bills. "She tells me it's okay," Jimmy said quietly, showing William a picture of a smiling teenage girl holding the cracked viola. "But I hear her crying sometimes when she practices. She's so good, Michael, so good. And I can't give her the one thing she needs." And William learned about Rosa. Patient, kind Rosa, who'd worked at Sullivan Technologies for 18 years, who came in every night with a smile despite the chronic pain in her back from years of physical labor, who'd raised 3 kids as a single mother while working 2 jobs, whose children had all graduated college, something she never got to do, because she'd worked herself to the bone to give them opportunities she never had. "Mr. Sullivan seems like a good man," Rosa said one night, training William on how to properly clean the CEO's office. "I've never met him, of course, But I see his picture in the lobby. He looks kind. William felt something crack in his chest. 18 years Rosa had worked in his building, and he'd never once stopped to learn her name. What makes you think he's kind? William asked carefully. Rosa smiled. The way people talk about him on the executive floors, they respect him. That has to count for something, right? Plus, he gives to charity. I see the awards. A kind man, probably. Just busy, too busy to notice the little people like us. Too busy to notice. Catherine's words echoed in his mind. You see titles. You don't see people. But it was what William learned about David Harrison, his CFO, that changed everything. It started small. A comment Rosa made about special cleaning requests. The way Carlos's expression darkened whenever Harrison's name came up. The unusual amount of after-hours meetings Harrison held in his office with people who didn't appear on any staff directory. William started paying attention, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Late-night meetings with contractors who'd been rejected by the company's official bid process. Documents left carelessly on Harrison's desk that showed payments to shell corporations. Phone conversations, overheard while cleaning nearby offices, about accounts and transfers that didn't appear in any reports William had seen. David Harrison, his trusted CFO, the man he'd promoted 3 years ago, was embezzling from Sullivan Technologies, systematically, carefully, and he'd been doing it for at least 2 years. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how Harrison treated people like Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy. William saw it firsthand one night in his 3rd week. He was cleaning the 12th floor when Harrison came out of his office, annoyed about something. Rosa was down the hall, replacing paper towels in the bathroom. "Hey, you!" Harrison snapped. "I need my office cleaned right now." "I have a meeting in 20 minutes." Rosa hurried over, apologetic. "Of course, Mr. Harrison, but it's on tomorrow's schedule." "Do I look like I care about the schedule? I need it now." Harrison's voice was sharp, dismissive. He looked at Rosa the way you'd look at a malfunctioning appliance. "Yes, sir, right away." Rosa's voice was quiet, professional, but William saw the way her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her supplies. He watched Harrison walk away, already on his phone. Rosa completely forgotten the moment he'd gotten what he wanted, and William felt something he hadn't felt in years, pure, uncomplicated rage. This was his company. These were his people. And the man he'd trusted was not only stealing from the company but treating its most vulnerable employees like they were invisible, like they were nothing. William kept quiet, kept cleaning, kept watching, because he was learning something else too, something Catherine had been trying to teach him all along. The invisible people saw everything. They knew where the bodies were buried because they were the ones who cleaned up after people like Harrison. They just had no voice, no power, no way to make anyone listen. But William Sullivan was listening now, and he was taking notes. Every suspicious meeting, every cruel dismissal, every piece of evidence that Harrison was too arrogant to hide from the people he considered beneath his notice. Rosa had been right about one thing. The night shift worked alone. But William was realizing they didn't have to be invisible. Not if someone finally chose to see them. His plan started forming in his mind. In 3 months, Sullivan Technologies would celebrate its 25th anniversary with a gala. Every executive, every department head, every major investor would be there. Harrison was already planning to use the event to push through several initiatives William now recognized as covers for larger thefts. What Harrison didn't know was that the CEO would be there too. The real CEO, with 6 months of evidence, 6 months of perspective, and 6 months of seeing exactly who David Harrison really was when he thought no one important was watching. But first, William had to finish learning the lesson. Because this wasn't just about exposing Harrison anymore. It was about understanding what Catherine had spent 25 years trying to show him. It was about seeing the people who made his success possible. People like Rosa, who'd worked 18 years without ever being seen. Like Carlos, whose talents were wasted because of bureaucratic barriers. Like Jimmy, who couldn't afford a $2,000 viola for his daughter, despite having one of the biggest hearts William had ever encountered. "You okay, Michael?" Rosa asked one night, finding him standing in the CEO's office, staring at the awards and photos on the walls. "Yeah," William said quietly. "Just thinking about what success really means." Rosa nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I think about that too sometimes. Wonder if the people up here know how much work goes into keeping their world running smooth, all us invisible folks." "You're not invisible," William said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Not to me." Rosa smiled, patted his shoulder. "You're a good man, Michael Chen. Don't let this place make you hard. Stay soft, stay kind. That's worth more than all the money in the world." She walked away, back to her work, humming quietly to herself, and William stood there in his CEO office, wearing a janitor's uniform, finally understanding what Catherine had tried to teach him. Success wasn't the empire. It was the people, and he'd spent 25 years looking right through them. But that was about to change. Month 3 of William's invisible education brought winter to Seattle and a series of events that would test everything he thought he understood about loyalty, courage, and dignity. The night started normally enough. William was buffing the floors on the 8th floor when he heard Rosa's voice down the hallway. Tight, stressed, unusual for her steady calm. "Mr. Harrison, I understand, but the schedule—" "I don't pay you to understand. I pay you to clean." Harrison's voice cut through the quiet office like a blade. "My clients are coming in 30 minutes, and this conference room looks like a disaster. Fix it. Now." William put down the buffer and moved quietly toward the voices. Through the glass wall of Conference Room B, he could see the situation. The room was already spotless. Rosa's work was always impeccable. But Harrison was standing there with his arms crossed, his face twisted in the kind of anger that had nothing to do with cleaning standards and everything to do with power. Rosa was 62 years old. She'd worked an 8-hour shift, gone home to care for her elderly mother, and come back for overtime because one of the other custodians had called in sick. She was running on 4 hours of sleep and chronic back pain she never complained about, and she was recleaning a conference room that didn't need it because a man making 15 times her salary needed to feel important. "Yes, Mr. Harrison," Rosa said quietly. Her hands were shaking as she gathered her supplies. Not from fear. William was learning to read these moments, from exhaustion and the effort it took to maintain dignity when someone was systematically stripping it away. Harrison walked past her without another word, already back on his phone. Rosa stood there for a moment, alone in the perfect conference room, her shoulders sagging under the weight of a disrespect so casual it didn't even register as cruelty to the man delivering it. William wanted to storm in there, wanted to fire Harrison on the spot, wanted to tell Rosa who he really was and that she'd never have to tolerate this treatment again. But he'd learned patience in 3 months of invisibility. He was gathering evidence, building a case, and most importantly, understanding the systematic nature of how people like Harrison wielded power against people who couldn't fight back. So instead, he walked up to Rosa after Harrison left. "Are you okay?" She smiled, that incredible ability she had to smile through anything. "Just another day, Michael. Some people measure their importance by how much they can make others feel small. I learned a long time ago not to let it touch who I am. How long has Harrison been treating you like this?" Something shifted in Rosa's expression, a crack in the professional mask. 3 years. Since he became CFO. Before that, he was just another manager. Now, she shook her head. "He's careful, you know? Never anything you could report, just 1,000 small cuts, always when no one else is watching." "I'm watching," William said quietly. Rosa looked at him with surprise, then something else. Hope, maybe. or just recognition that someone finally saw her as a complete human being rather than a function. "Thank you, Michael. That means more than you know." She squeezed his arm and went back to work. But William stood there, adding another entry to the detailed journal he was keeping. 3 years of systematic abuse. And he'd been completely unaware because he'd been too high up in his tower to see what was happening in his own building. The next incident came 2 weeks later and involved Carlos. William was restocking supplies on the 3rd floor when he heard voices from the IT department. The main lights were off. IT ran skeleton night crews, but one of the labs was illuminated. Through the glass wall, William saw Carlos inside with 2 of the night shift engineers. All 3 gathered around a whiteboard covered in equations and diagrams. Carlos was explaining something, marker in hand, his face animated in a way William had never seen during their custodial shifts. The engineers were nodding, taking notes, asking questions. This wasn't a custodian cleaning a room. This was a professional having a technical discussion. Curious, William moved closer. Carlos was working through a thermal management problem, one of the issues Sullivan Technologies had been struggling with in their new server design. And from what William could follow, Carlos's approach was brilliant, elegant, something the engineering team had been trying to crack for 3 months. "But Carlos, this could actually work," one of the engineers said. "Have you talked to anyone in product development?" Carlos's expression changed. The animation drained away, replaced by something resigned. "I'm a janitor, Ryan. Who would I talk to? How would I even get a meeting?" "But you have an engineering degree." "From Venezuela, which apparently doesn't count here." Carlos's voice wasn't bitter, just factual. "I've tried. 4 times. I've applied for engineering positions. 4 times rejected. My degree isn't from an American university, so it doesn't matter that I design systems that are still running back home. It doesn't matter that I could solve problems like this one. I'm invisible to the people who make those decisions." William felt those words like a physical blow. 4 times. Carlos had applied 4 times, and William had never even seen the applications. They'd been filtered out somewhere in HR. Dismissed because of bureaucratic requirements that treated a human being's knowledge and experience as worthless based on geography. Ryan started to protest, but Carlos was already cleaning up the whiteboard, erasing his elegant solution. "It's okay. I'm used to it. And honestly, this is enough, getting to think about engineering problems again, even if it's just for a few minutes with you guys late at night. That's something." William stood in the shadows, watching Carlos return to his cart of cleaning supplies, and made another entry in his journal. But this time, he added something else, a directive to HR, to be implemented the day he revealed himself. New policy. All engineering degrees would be evaluated on competency, not geographic origin. And Carlos Martinez would be the first person offered a transfer to the engineering team. But the incident that broke William's heart completely happened in month 4, and it involved Jimmy. It was 2 in the morning when William found Jimmy sitting in the executive break room, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Jimmy never cried. William had seen him handle disrespect, exhausting shifts, and cruel comments with unshakable dignity. But tonight, something had broken. "Jimmy!" William approached carefully. "What happened?" Jimmy looked up, his face wet with tears, and held out his phone. On the screen was a video of his daughter, Anna, performing in her high school orchestra concert. She was playing the cracked viola, and even through the phone's speaker, William could hear how talented she was. The music was beautiful, heartbreaking, full of the kind of raw emotion that only came from someone who loved what they were doing, despite everything working against them. She got accepted," Jimmy said, his voice breaking. "Juilliard gave her a full scholarship. Full scholarship, Michael. She's going to be a professional musician. My daughter, who I brought to this country when she was 5 years old, who grew up watching me clean floors and send money home, she's going to Juilliard." "Jimmy, that's incredible." "She needs a better instrument." The words came out in a rush, almost angry. The scholarship covers tuition, but she needs a professional viola. The music department said she can't use that broken one. It's not good enough for Juilliard's standards. She needs a new one. $3,000 for a decent one. $5,000 for what she really needs. William felt his throat tighten. Can you? I have $800 saved. Jimmy's laugh was hollow, painful. $800 after 10 years of saving. Because every time I get close, something happens. My mother gets sick and needs medicine. My brother's family loses their home in a typhoon. My cousin's daughter needs school supplies. I send the money because that's what you do. You help your family. But now, he looked at the phone again, at his daughter's face full of joy and hope. Now my own daughter needs something, and I can't give it to her. Jimmy wiped his eyes, trying to compose himself. I went to Mr. Harrison tonight, asked if there were any chances for overtime, any special projects I could work. He looked at me like I was begging, told me that if I needed more money, maybe I should consider getting a real job. The rage that flooded through William in that moment was unlike anything he'd felt in his life. Not the corporate anger of a deal gone wrong or a competitor gaining ground. This was primal, protective. The fury of seeing a good man, a father who'd sacrificed everything for his family, being dismissed as worthless by someone who made more in a month than Jimmy made in 3 years. A real job, William repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. I've worked here for 12 years, Michael. 12 years of coming in at midnight and leaving at 8 in the morning. 12 years of keeping this place running while everyone else sleeps. And to him, Jimmy shook his head. To him, I'm nothing, less than nothing. A man who can't even provide a viola for his daughter. William sat down next to Jimmy, his mind racing. He could fix this right now. One phone call, one transfer, and Jimmy would have the money for the viola. But that would mean revealing himself, and he wasn't ready yet. There was more to learn, more evidence to gather, more people who needed to be seen. But he couldn't let Anna go to Juilliard without the instrument she deserved. Jimmy, William said carefully, if someone offered to help, anonymously maybe, would you accept it? Jimmy looked at him sharply. I'm not a charity case, Michael. I've never taken handouts. Not a handout. A recognition of value that's been overlooked. I don't understand. William didn't explain further. But the next day, Michael Chen called an anonymous tip line reporting a wealthy donor who wanted to sponsor talented musicians from immigrant families. And 3 days later, Jimmy received a letter informing him that his daughter had been selected to receive a $5,000 instrument grant from the Sullivan Foundation for Artistic Excellence. William watched Jimmy read the letter during their break, watched the disbelief turn to joy, then to tears again. But different tears this time. Jimmy called his daughter right there, at 2:30 in the morning, waking her up to tell her the news. William could hear Anna screaming with joy through the phone. God is good, Jimmy said after he hung up, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know who chose her, but God is good. William said nothing, because it wasn't God. It was a CEO finally using his resources the way they should have been used all along, to see the people who made his success possible and to honor their dreams as valid as his own. But these individual moments of kindness weren't enough. William was learning that the cruelty wasn't just personal, it was systemic, and Harrison was at the center of it. In month 5, William's investigation bore fruit in the worst possible way. He'd been documenting Harrison's suspicious activities, but what he discovered one night while cleaning Harrison's office went beyond financial theft. It was betrayal of the most calculated kind. Harrison had left his computer unlocked. Arrogance or carelessness, and it didn't matter. William, cleaning the desk, saw the open document. It was a proposal to the board of directors. A proposal to restructure Sullivan Technologies by eliminating redundant operational costs. William read through it with growing horror. The redundant costs Harrison wanted to eliminate included the entire night custodial staff. Rosa, Carlos, Jimmy, and 15 others were marked for termination to improve profit margins. They would be replaced by a contracted cleaning service that paid minimum wage, no benefits, and rotated staff every few months to avoid having to provide any job security. The proposal claimed this would save the company $200,000 annually. What it didn't mention was that Harrison's bonus structure would increase by $150,000 if the proposal passed. He was literally profiting from destroying the livelihoods of people who dedicated years of their lives to the company. But it got worse. The proposal was scheduled to be presented at the 25th anniversary gala. Harrison planned to use the celebration, the event meant to honor the company's success, to push through a restructuring that would devastate the very people whose work had built that success. William photographed every page, added it to his growing file of evidence, and made a decision. The gala was in 3 weeks. Harrison thought he was going to use that night to consolidate his power, eliminate the invisible workers, and position himself for an eventual takeover of the company. What Harrison didn't know was that William Sullivan would be there, not as Michael Chen, the janitor, as the CEO, and he would have 6 months of evidence showing exactly who David Harrison really was. But William didn't tell Rosa, Carlos, or Jimmy any of this, because he'd learned something crucial in his 6 months of invisibility. Telling people they were valued wasn't enough. He had to show them, in a way that would change not just their individual situations, but the entire culture of how Sullivan Technologies saw and treated its essential workers. So he kept quiet, kept cleaning, kept watching, and kept planning. 1 week before the gala, Rosa found William sitting in the break room during their lunch break, staring at the wall with an expression she'd learned to read over the past 6 months. "You look troubled, Michael." "Just thinking about fairness," William said. "About how some people give everything to a place, and that place takes them for granted." Rosa sat down across from him. "You've been different lately, quieter. Like you're carrying something heavy." "Aren't we all?" "Yes, but you carry it differently. Like you're planning something." She smiled. "I've been doing this work for 18 years, Michael. You learn to read people. And you're not just a janitor, are you?" William's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe you're someone who lost everything and is starting over. Maybe you're running from something. Or maybe—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe you're someone who needed to see how the other half lives. Whatever it is, you've treated us like equals from day one, like real people. That's rare, Michael Chen, rare enough that I notice." William met her eyes, saw the wisdom there, the understanding. Rosa had figured something out, even if she didn't have all the pieces. "Would it bother you if I wasn't who I said I was?" "That depends. Are you planning to hurt anyone?" "No. I'm planning to help. And to expose someone who's been hurting people like you for a long time." Rosa nodded slowly. "Then no. It wouldn't bother me. Sometimes people need to walk in different shoes to understand where those shoes have been walking. As long as you're on the side of the people who need someone on their side, I don't care what name you use." She stood up, patted his shoulder with that same maternal warmth she'd shown him from the beginning, and went back to work. And William sat there, humbled by the grace of a woman who'd figured out his deception and chose to trust his intentions anyway. 5 days before the gala, Carlos pulled William aside during their shift. "Can I ask you something? As a friend?" "Of course. That thermal management solution I showed you and Ryan a few weeks ago, they implemented it. The whole engineering team. They're calling it the Carlos configuration in their documentation." His eyes were bright with emotion. "They didn't have to do that. They could have just used it and never mentioned where it came from. But they gave me credit. Ryan even asked if I wanted to present it at the next product development meeting." "That's incredible, Carlos. The thing is, Michael, I don't know if I should, because if I present as a janitor, they'll dismiss it. If I present as an engineer, I'm lying because I don't have a recognized degree. I'm trapped between what I am and what I could be, and I don't know how to bridge that gap. William looked at his friend, because that's what Carlos had become in 6 months of late-night conversations and shared understanding. What if someone bridged it for you? What do you mean? What if someone with power chose to see your value regardless of bureaucratic barriers? What if someone made it so your work and knowledge mattered more than where you got your degree? Carlos laughed, but it was tinged with sadness. That would be nice, Michael. But people with power don't usually notice people like us. And when they do, they don't usually care enough to change anything. Sometimes they do, William said quietly. Sometimes they just need to be reminded that power comes with responsibility, and that the people who built your success deserve to benefit from it. Carlos looked at him curiously, that same expression Rosa had worn when she'd asked if he was really just a janitor. You talk like someone who knows about power, Michael. I know about power, William admitted, and I know about responsibility. And I'm learning about grace from people who have every reason to be bitter, but choose kindness instead. 3 days before the gala, Jimmy found William cleaning the 15th floor, the executive floor, the one that usually felt like a different world from the lower levels where the invisible people worked. Michael, can you come here for a second? William followed Jimmy into Harrison's office. The CFO wasn't there. He was out of town until the day of the gala, and Jimmy had been tasked with a deep clean before his return. Look at this, Jimmy said, gesturing to Harrison's desk. All this, the photos with celebrities, the awards, the expensive art, the view of the entire city. You know how much this office costs to maintain? More than I make in 5 years, one office. That bothers you? William asked, though he knew the answer. It bothers me that the man who has all this looked at me like trash when I asked for overtime so I could afford an instrument for my daughter. It bothers me that he's never once learned my name even though I've cleaned his office for 12 years. It bothers me that to him, I'm not a person. I'm just maintenance, a function, something that happens while he's not here. Jimmy turned to face William. You know what my daughter said when I told her about the grant? She said, maybe someone finally noticed what you do, Tate. Maybe someone finally saw. And I wanted so badly for that to be true. But I know it's probably just random, just luck. Because the David Harrisons of the world don't see us. They can't. Because if they did, they'd have to recognize that their success was built on our backs. What if someone did see? William asked. What if someone was paying attention and decided to do something about it? Then that would be a miracle, Jimmy said simply. And I've learned not to expect miracles, just to do good work, treat people with dignity, and hope that my children have better lives than I did. That's enough. It has to be enough. But it wasn't enough. William stood in Harrison's office after Jimmy left, looking at all the trappings of success built on cruelty and indifference, and he knew what he had to do at the gala. It wasn't enough to expose Harrison's financial crimes. He had to expose the deeper crime, the systematic devaluing of human dignity that happened when you refused to see the people who made your life possible. The night before the gala, William sat in his penthouse for the first time in 6 months. It felt foreign now, sterile, empty. All the material success he'd accumulated seemed meaningless compared to what he'd learned in 6 months of working alongside Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy. He thought about Catherine, about what she'd tried to teach him, about the lessons he'd been too blind to learn until he'd walked in the shoes of the people he'd overlooked. Tomorrow night, at the gala celebrating Sullivan Technologies' 25th anniversary, William Sullivan would reveal himself. He would expose David Harrison's crimes, and more importantly, he would ensure that the people who truly built the company's success would finally be seen, valued, and honored in a way that would change not just their lives, but the entire culture of how companies viewed their essential workers. But tonight, Michael Chen wrote a letter, not to the board of directors or the executives or the investors, to Rosa Martinez, Carlos Martinez, and Jimmy Santos. Three people who'd shown him more about real success, dignity, and grace than 25 years of wealth accumulation ever had. The letter started simply, "I owe you an apology and an explanation. Both will come tomorrow night. But first, I need you to understand something. You are not invisible. You have never been invisible. I was just blind, and you taught me how to see. Thank you for that gift. I promise to spend the rest of my time at Sullivan Technologies making sure no one ever overlooks the people who matter most. With gratitude and respect, William Sullivan." He would give them the letters tomorrow, after everything came to light. But tonight, he sat in his empty penthouse and practiced the speech he would give at the gala. Not the CEO speech about profit margins and shareholder value. The real speech. The one about worth, dignity, and the people who'd been invisible for far too long. Tomorrow night, everything would change. Tomorrow night, the invisible would be seen, and William Sullivan would finally understand what his wife had spent 25 years trying to teach him. That success isn't measured in billions, but in whether you honored the humanity of every person who helped you build your empire. That lesson was worth 6 months of mopping floors. It was worth 6 months of being invisible, because now William Sullivan could see, and he would never be blind again. The morning of the gala, William Sullivan woke up in his penthouse for the first time in 6 months as himself. Not as Michael Chen, not as the invisible janitor, as the CEO of Sullivan Technologies. The transformation was jarring. He showered, shaved the beard, put in his regular contact lenses instead of the drugstore glasses, styled his hair the way he used to, put on the Tom Ford suit that cost more than Rosa made in 3 months, and looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back looked like the William Sullivan everyone expected to see, polished, powerful, successful. But he felt like an imposter, because the real William Sullivan, the one who'd learned what mattered, wore a janitor's uniform and mopped floors alongside people society had taught him to overlook. His lawyer, Robert, arrived at 9 with the documentation, 6 months of evidence, Harrison's embezzlement, the shell corporations, the falsified reports, the proposal to eliminate the custodial staff for personal profit. Every meeting, every cruel interaction, every piece of systematic cruelty that William had witnessed and documented. "This is solid," Robert said, reviewing the files. "Harrison will be finished. Criminal charges, civil suits, the works. You've done remarkable investigative work, William." "It wasn't investigative work," William said quietly. "It was paying attention, something I should have been doing all along." At noon, William met with his head of HR, Chen, no relation to his fake identity. What he was about to do would be irregular, possibly controversial, but absolutely necessary. "I need you to draft 3 employment contracts," he told her. "Expedited. Effective immediately following tonight's gala." Diane pulled out her tablet. "Go ahead. Carlos Martinez, currently night custodial staff, transfer to engineering department with full recognition of his Venezuelan credentials. Starting salary commensurate with his experience. 15 years designing water filtration systems. Backdate the recognition so he gets credit for the years he should have been engineering rather than cleaning." Diane's eyes widened, but she nodded, taking notes. "Rosa Martinez, current night custodial supervisor, promotion to director of facilities management, full department oversight, benefits package, executive floor office. She's been running the entire operation anyway. Time we paid her accordingly. That's a significant jump. She's earned it. 18 years of keeping this company running while we took her for granted." William's voice was firm. "And her first directive will be to review all our custodial and maintenance contracts, ensure everyone is paid living wages, and eliminate the practice of treating essential workers as disposable." Diane was actually smiling now. "And the third?" "Jimmy Santos, currently night custodial staff. Transfer to corporate relations with special focus on community outreach and employee family support." Starting salary $80,000. His first project will be creating a comprehensive support program for employees with family members pursuing higher education. And I want a company instrument grant established in his daughter Anna's name. $5,000 annually for talented students from immigrant families. William, this is... Diane paused, emotional. This is beautiful, but the board will approve it because I'm the CEO, and these changes are non-negotiable. I've spent 25 years building this company. I'm done building it on the backs of people I don't honor. He met her eyes. Can you have those contracts ready by tonight? I'll have them ready by 5. That afternoon, William visited his daughter Emily in Boston. She'd agreed to fly back for the gala, though she'd told him on the phone that she was only coming out of obligation, not because she wanted to celebrate the company that had stolen her father from her for most of her life. They met in the hotel lobby where she was staying. Emily looked so much like Catherine, same determined eyes, same way of standing that said she wouldn't compromise her principles for anyone. Dad! She hugged him, but there was distance in it. Well, thank you for coming, Emily. You said you had something important to tell me, so I'm here. She sat down, arms crossed. What is it? Another acquisition? A new product line? Let me guess. You want me to come work for the company. I spent the last 6 months working as a janitor in my own building. Emily stared at him. What? William told her everything. Catherine's final words. The decision to go undercover. The 6 months of learning to see. Rosa, Carlos, Jimmy. Harrison's cruelty and corruption. The systematic devaluation of human dignity that had been happening under his nose while he celebrated profit margins. Emily listened without interrupting. And when he finished, there were tears in her eyes. Mom would have loved this, she said quietly. Not that you had to go undercover, but that you finally understood what she was trying to show you. I should have learned it when she was alive. Maybe. But you're learning it now. Emily reached across and took his hand. So what happens tonight? Tonight, I expose Harrison. I honor the people who actually built this company. And I try to make Sullivan Technologies into what it should have been all along, a place that values every person who walks through the doors, regardless of their title or position. And what about you, Dad? What do you want? William thought about that. I want to be the kind of man your mother thought I could be. I want to build something that makes her proud. And I want to prove to you that it's never too late to learn the lessons that matter most. Emily smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Then let's go to this gala. I want to see David Harrison's face when you reveal yourself. Actually, William said, I want you to meet some people first. Before the gala. The people who taught me what Mom was trying to show me. That evening, 2 hours before the gala, William brought Emily to Sullivan Technologies. The building was being prepared for the celebration. Catering staff setting up, florists arranging displays, tech crew testing audio-visual equipment. But William went straight to the custodial office on the first floor. Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy were there, preparing for their regular night shift, unaware that in a few hours everything would change. Michael! Rosa's face lit up when she saw him, then confusion as she registered the expensive suit. What? Rosa, Carlos, Jimmy, this is my daughter, Emily. William took a breath. And there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning. He told them everything, who he really was, why he'd gone undercover, what he'd learned, what he'd discovered about Harrison, and what he planned to do about it tonight. The silence that followed was heavy. Carlos was the first to speak. You're William Sullivan, the CEO. His voice was flat, unreadable. Yes. You lied to us for 6 months. Yes. You pretended to be one of us while you were really... Carlos, Rosa interrupted, her voice gentle. He was one of us. Maybe not in circumstance, but in experience. He worked beside us, he learned what we face every day, and he saw us. She turned to William. You saw us? Really saw us? That's worth more than honesty about a name. Jimmy was quiet, his face thoughtful. Then he asked, The instrument grant for Anna, that was you? William nodded. You didn't have to do that. You could have just watched, documented, left. I couldn't, because by then, Anna's dreams mattered to me as much as any executive's bonus. Because you'd taught me that worth isn't measured by salary or title. Jimmy's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, not just for the grant, for seeing my daughter as worthy of investment, for treating her dreams like they mattered. They do matter. You all matter. And tonight, everyone's going to know that. Carlos stepped forward. So what happens now? You expose Harrison, fire him, maybe send him to prison. Then what? You go back to the penthouse and we go back to cleaning floors. No, William said firmly. Tonight, after I expose Harrison, I'm announcing promotions. Rosa, you're the new director of facilities management. Carlos, you're transferring to engineering with full recognition of your credentials and experience. Jimmy, you're joining corporate relations to build family support programs. The shock on their faces was total. But, Rosa started, I don't have a degree. You have 18 years of running the best facilities operation in Seattle. You have the respect of every person who works under you. You have competence, wisdom, and grace that no degree can teach. That's more than qualified. Carlos was shaking his head in disbelief. You're giving me an engineering position after 4 rejections? I'm correcting 4 mistakes. Your knowledge doesn't have less value because you learned it in Venezuela. Your talents aren't less real because bureaucracy didn't recognize them. You're brilliant, Carlos. Time we treated you that way. Jimmy just kept crying, his shoulders shaking with the release of years of being undervalued. Emily moved to him, put her hand on his shoulder, and that simple gesture of respect from the CEO's daughter to a janitor said everything about what was about to change. Why? Rosa asked finally. Why go through all this? You could have just promoted us quietly. Why the public announcement? Because it's not enough for me to know your value. Everyone needs to know. The board, the executives, the investors, every employee in this company. People need to see that the custodial staff isn't invisible labor. You're essential human beings whose contributions matter just as much as anyone else's. And that starts with me saying it publicly at the event meant to celebrate this company's success because you are this company's success. Rosa hugged him then. A real hug, the kind you give family. Catherine would be so proud of you, she whispered. I hope so, William said. God, I hope so. 2 hours later, Sullivan Technologies' 25th anniversary gala was in full swing. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was packed with Seattle's business elite, board members, executives, department heads, major investors, local politicians, tech journalists, everyone who mattered in the conventional sense of mattering. David Harrison was working the room, confident and charismatic. He'd been running the company in William's absence, positioning himself as the logical successor. Tonight was supposed to be his coronation. The proposal to eliminate the custodial staff was tucked in his portfolio, ready to present to the board members he'd carefully cultivated. What Harrison didn't know was that William Sullivan had entered through the service entrance 30 minutes earlier and was currently backstage, waiting. At 8 p.m., the board chairman took the stage to begin the official program. Good evening, everyone. 25 years ago, William Sullivan had a vision. William listened to the speech from backstage. All the metrics of success, revenue growth, market share, innovation, all true, all important, all missing the point of what actually made any of it possible. And though William couldn't be with us tonight to celebrate, actually, William said, walking onto the stage, I am here. The gasp that went through the ballroom was audible. Heads turned, whispers exploded, and David Harrison's face went absolutely white. William took the microphone, looked out at the sea of shocked faces, and began to speak. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Sullivan Technologies. 25 years is a significant milestone. But I'm not here to talk about revenue or market share. I'm here to tell you about the 6 months that taught me what success actually means. He told them everything. Going undercover, working as Michael Chen, the people he'd met, the lessons he'd learned, the systematic devaluing of essential workers that had been happening while he'd been too blind to see it. Rosa Martinez has worked in this building for 18 years, Williams said. She's never been to a company gala, never been recognized at an awards ceremony, never received anything beyond her hourly wage and the occasional good job from a supervisor. Yet she's spent 18 years making this company function, keeping our offices clean, our facilities running, our work environment professional. How many of you even know her name? Silence. Uncomfortable shifting. Carlos Martinez has an engineering degree and 15 years of experience designing water filtration systems. He applied for engineering positions at this company 4 times. 4 times we rejected him because his degree wasn't from an American university, so he cleaned our floors instead. Meanwhile, we struggled with problems he could have solved in an afternoon. How many of you knew we had that talent working night shifts and going unrecognized? More silence. Diane from HR was actually crying. Jimmy Santos has worked here for 12 years. He has a daughter going to Juilliard. He had to beg for overtime to afford an instrument for her. When he asked for help, he was told to get a real job. How many of you think 12 years of keeping this building operational isn't a real job? William paused, letting it sink in. Then he turned to Harrison, who was frozen in his seat. And then there's David Harrison, our CFO, the man who's been running the company in my absence. Would you like to tell everyone about your proposal for tonight, David? The one about eliminating redundant operational costs? Harrison didn't move. I'll tell them, William said. David planned to use tonight's celebration to propose eliminating our entire night custodial staff, replacing them with a rotating contract service, saving the company $200,000 annually while increasing his own bonus by $150,000. He was going to profit from destroying the livelihoods of people who've dedicated years to this company. The whispers were growing louder. Board members were pulling out phones. But that's not all. For the past 2 years, David has been systematically embezzling from Sullivan Technologies, shell corporations, falsified reports, unauthorized transfers. I have 6 months of documentation. Every meeting, every transaction, every piece of evidence needed for criminal prosecution. William gestured to Robert, who came onto the stage with file boxes. Security will be escorting Mr. Harrison out of the building. The board will receive full documentation tomorrow morning, and the authorities will receive copies immediately after. Harrison finally found his voice. You can't do this. You abandoned the company. I've been running everything. You've been stealing from everything and treating human beings like disposable resources in the process. That ends now. Security moved in. Harrison was escorted out, still protesting, still not understanding that his cruelty mattered just as much as his crimes. When the doors closed behind him, William turned back to the audience. I want to invite 3 people to join me on stage. Rosa Martinez, Carlos Martinez, and Jimmy Santos. Could you please come up here? The 3 of them had been standing near the back of the ballroom. William had insisted they attend as guests, not workers. They made their way to the stage, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. These 3 people represent everything that's been wrong with how we measure success, and everything that's going to change starting tonight. William turned to them. Rosa, I'm promoting you to Director of Facilities Management. You'll oversee all building operations, manage department budgets, and ensure every person working in facilities is paid a living wage with full benefits. Rosa covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Carlos, you're being transferred to engineering effective immediately, with full recognition of your credentials and experience. Your starting salary will reflect 15 years of professional engineering work, backdated to when you first applied here. You'll be leading the thermal management team. Carlos was shaking his head in disbelief, his own eyes wet. Jimmy, you're joining corporate relations to develop comprehensive family support programs, specifically a scholarship and grant program for employees, children pursuing higher education. The program will be called the Ana Santos Initiative for Educational Excellence. Jimmy's knees literally buckled. Emily, who'd moved to stand near the stage, caught him. William addressed the ballroom again. Starting next quarter, all essential workers, custodial, maintenance, cafeteria, security, will receive 20% raises, full health insurance, retirement benefits, and educational support for their families. This isn't charity, it's paying people what they've always been worth. The applause started slowly, then built. Some people were genuinely moved. Others were probably just relieved the spotlight was off them. But it didn't matter. The change was happening. After the official program ended, after the contracts were signed, after the celebration continued without William participating because he had more important things to do, he stood with Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy in a quiet corner of the ballroom. "This is overwhelming," Rosa said. "I don't know if I can do this job." "You've been doing it for 18 years, William said. "Just with recognition now." "People are going to say we didn't earn these positions," Carlos said quietly. "Let them. You've earned them through years of undervalued work and unrecognized talent. Anyone who questions that can answer to me." "Why us?" Jimmy asked. "There are hundreds of people in similar situations. Why did we get to be the ones who—" "Because I met you," William said simply. "Because you taught me what my wife spent 25 years trying to show me. Because in 6 months of working beside you, I learned more about real success than 25 years of corporate achievement taught me. This isn't rescue, it's recognition, and it's just the beginning." Emily joined them, having spent the last hour talking with other employees, hearing their stories, understanding what her father had learned. "Dad, there are 12 other people who've been here over 10 years in similar positions, undervalued, overlooked. Then we'll review every single case, and we'll make it right." William looked at the 4 of them. "This isn't a one-time gesture. This is a complete restructuring of how Sullivan Technologies values human beings." Later that night, alone in his office with Emily, William stood at the window overlooking Seattle. "How are you feeling?" Emily asked. "Like I wasted 25 years being blind. Like I can't get that time back. Like I owe Catherine an apology I'll never get to give." "She knows," Emily said softly. "Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud of you. Am I doing the right thing? The board is going to fight some of these changes. Investors will question the costs. People will say I'm being emotional and impractical. People who say that are the ones who've never cleaned a floor at 2 in the morning or sent money home to a family member in crisis instead of saving for their own dreams. You're not being impractical. You're being human." Finally, William smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from Mom. She saw people, really saw them. She would have loved Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy. She would have loved them years before I did," William admitted. "That's the tragedy of it. All those years, she was trying to show me, and I was too busy building an empire to understand what she was building, a life that honored everyone it touched. Well, you're building it now. Better late than never." They stood there together, father and daughter, looking out at the city where hundreds of people were currently working night shifts, cleaning offices, securing buildings, keeping the world running for people who'd never learned their names. But in at least one building, things were changing. And William Sullivan, who'd lost everything that mattered and found it again in the most unexpected place, was determined to make sure that change was just the beginning. The invisible would be seen, the undervalued would be honored, and maybe, just maybe, he'd finally become the man Catherine Sullivan always believed he could be. That was a lesson worth 6 months of mopping floors, and a lesson he'd spend the rest of his life teaching to anyone willing to learn. 3 months after the gala, Sullivan Technologies looked fundamentally different. Not in its physical structure, though Rosa had redecorated the facilities department offices to feel less like punishment and more like pride, but in its soul. The changes William had initiated that night rippled outward in ways even he hadn't fully anticipated. Carlos's thermal management solution, properly implemented and credited, had saved 3 major projects and earned Sullivan Technologies recognition from the Department of Energy. Rosa's restructuring of facilities operations had improved efficiency while simultaneously improving worker conditions. Turns out people worked better when they felt valued. Jimmy's family support program had 62 applications in its first month alone. But the real change wasn't in the metrics or the press coverage or the awards. It was in the hallways, in the break rooms, in the way executives now knew the names of people who cleaned their offices, in the way the word just had been eliminated from how people described jobs. Just a janitor became facilities professional. Just maintenance became building systems specialist. William spent his days doing CEO work, board meetings, strategy sessions, investor calls. But 3 nights a week, from midnight to 2 a.m., he still put on a custodial uniform and worked alongside the night shift, not as an undercover billionaire. As William Sullivan, CEO, who believed that understanding every level of his company was essential to leading it properly. The first time he showed up in uniform after the gala, Rosa had looked at him skeptically. "You don't have to do this for show, William." "It's not for show. It's for me. To remember. To stay connected. To make sure I never become blind again." And so he mopped floors and emptied trash and cleaned bathrooms alongside people who no longer saw him as a novelty or a boss slumming, but as someone genuinely trying to understand. The other executives thought he was eccentric. The custodial staff thought he was sincere. William thought he was finally doing his job correctly. Emily moved back to Seattle and took a position in the company, not a nepotism role, but in corporate social responsibility, where she worked with Jimmy to expand the family support programs. She'd inherited Catherine's gift for seeing people, and she used it to ensure the changes her father had started became permanent cultural shifts rather than temporary gestures. "You know what the best part is?" she told William one day. 3 months into her new role, people are starting to do this themselves. I've had 5 department heads ask how they can create similar recognition programs in their divisions. The culture is changing because people want to change it now, not because you're forcing it. "That's your mother's influence," William said. "She always believed people were better than they showed themselves to be. They just needed someone to expect better from them." She was right. David Harrison's trial was set for the following spring. The evidence William had gathered was overwhelming. But beyond the criminal charges, Harrison had become a cautionary tale in Seattle business circles, a reminder that cruelty and greed eventually caught up with you, especially when you underestimated the people you considered invisible. Rosa settled into her role as Director of Facilities Management with the same grace and competence she'd brought to custodial supervision. Her first major initiative was implementing a mentorship program pairing facilities workers with employees in other departments, breaking down the invisible walls that separated the essential workers from everyone else. People thought this would be charity, Rosa told William during one of their regular check-ins. Like we were the department that needed help. But it turns out custodial and maintenance staff see everything, inefficiencies, problems, opportunities, because we're in every space. We're partners in making the company run better. We just needed someone to ask our opinions. Carlos thrived in engineering. His thermal management solution led to 2 patent applications with his name prominently featured. He was lecturing at the University of Washington, mentoring immigrant engineers, and proving every single day that geographical origin of a degree mattered far less than actual knowledge and ability. "You know what's amazing?" Carlos said one day, standing in the engineering lab where he now worked. "I'm solving the same kind of problems I used to think about while cleaning floors. But now people listen. Now my solutions get implemented. Now I get credit. Nothing changed about me, just about who was willing to see me." "Everything changed about you," William corrected. "You're the same brilliant person. but now your environment matches your abilities. Jimmy's work in corporate relations had become his calling. The Ana Santos initiative had expanded beyond Sullivan Technologies. Other companies were reaching out, asking how to implement similar programs. Jimmy had become a spokesperson for family support in corporate structures, traveling to conferences, writing articles, advocating for policy changes. And Anna? She was thriving at Juilliard, playing the viola her father's years of sacrifice and William's intervention had finally made possible. She'd sent Jimmy a video from her first major performance. William had been in his office when Jimmy played it for him, both of them crying openly as Anna's music filled the space. "She says to tell you thank you," Jimmy had said. "She wants to meet you someday, to thank the man who saw worth in a janitor's daughter's dreams." "Her dreams had worth long before I saw them," William said. "I just finally noticed. That's not charity. That's basic human decency." But for all the success stories and positive changes, William still carried the weight of the years he'd wasted being blind. Late at night, alone in his penthouse or working alongside the custodial staff, he thought about all the Rosa Martinezes and Carlos Martinezes and Jimmy Santoses who'd worked in his building before he'd learned to see. All the people who'd retired or moved on without ever being recognized. All the invisible labor that had built his empire while he'd celebrated only the visible accomplishments. He couldn't undo those years, couldn't go back and honor people who were long gone. But he could make sure it never happened again. And he could share what he'd learned with other leaders, other companies, other people who might be making the same mistakes he had. 6 months after the gala, William gave a TED Talk titled, "The People You Don't See." It went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments from custodial workers, maintenance staff, food service professionals, all the invisible people sharing their stories of being overlooked, undervalued, and finally feeling like someone understood. The talk wasn't about Sullivan Technologies or David Harrison or even William's 6 months undercover. It was about the fundamental human tendency to categorize people by function rather than seeing them as complete individuals. It was about how success built on the invisibility of others isn't really success. It was about Catherine and what she'd tried to teach him and why it took losing everything that mattered to finally learn the lesson. "My wife died trying to teach me something I was too blind to see," William said in the talk's closing. "That worth isn't measured by salary or title or position, that the people who keep our world running, who clean our spaces and maintain our buildings and ensure our basic needs are met, aren't background characters in our success stories. They're heroes in their own right, with dreams and struggles and dignity that deserve recognition. I spent 6 months working as a janitor in my own company, and I learned more in those 6 months than in 25 years as CEO. I learned that the people I'd been trained to overlook were the ones with the most to teach me about grace, resilience, and what real success looks like. If you're watching this, I want you to try something. Tomorrow, when you go to work or school or wherever you spend your days, find one person whose job is to be invisible. The janitor, the security guard, the cafeteria worker, the person you walk past every day without noticing. Learn their name. Ask about their day. See them. You might be surprised what you learn. You might be humbled by what they teach you. And you might, like me, discover that the most important lessons in life come from the people you've been trained not to see. My wife, Catherine, knew this. She tried to show me for 25 years. I'm grateful I finally learned it, even if I learned it too late to tell her. So I'm telling you instead, see the people around you, all of them, the visible and the invisible, the celebrated and the overlooked. Because character isn't shown in how you treat people who can help you. It's shown in how you treat people who can do nothing for you. And those people, the ones society has taught us to overlook, they're often the ones with the most to teach us about what it means to live with dignity, purpose, and grace. Thank you. And please, see someone tomorrow. Really see them. You never know what lesson they might have to teach you. The talk ended. The audience stood, and across the world, millions of people watched a billionaire CEO admit he'd been blind, describe how he'd learned to see, and challenge everyone else to do the same. Rosa watched it in her new office, crying. Carlos watched it in the engineering lab, nodding. Jimmy watched it on his phone during a flight to a conference where he'd be speaking about family support programs, feeling proud of the man who'd chosen to see when he could have stayed blind. And Emily watched it in her apartment, thinking about her mother and feeling grateful that sometimes, even when you lose the person trying to teach you a lesson, you can still learn it. You can still honor them. You can still become who they believed you could be. 1 year after William's first night as Michael Chen, Sullivan Technologies held a memorial service for Catherine Sullivan. Not in some corporate function room, but in the custodial break room on the first floor, the place where William had eaten countless lunches with Rosa, Carlos, and Jimmy, learning what his wife had tried to teach him. The service was attended by executives and custodial staff equally, by board members and cafeteria workers, by people Catherine had known and people she'd never met, but whose lives had been changed by the lesson she'd tried to teach her husband. William spoke briefly, his voice thick with emotion. My wife believed that every person had worth, that success meant nothing if it didn't honor the humanity of everyone involved. I spent most of our marriage not understanding what she was trying to show me, and when I finally did understand, she was gone. But her lesson didn't die with her. It's alive in every policy change we've made at Sullivan Technologies. It's alive in every person who now has recognition they should have had all along. It's alive in the culture we're building, one that sees people, not functions, that values humans, not just productivity. Catherine, wherever you are, I hope you're proud. I hope you know that I finally learned it. And I hope you know that I'll spend the rest of my life teaching it to anyone willing to listen. Rosa placed flowers on the memorial table. Carlos read a poem he'd written about invisible hands that build visible empires. Jimmy's daughter Anna played a viola solo, Amazing Grace, that left not a single dry eye in the room. And when it was over, when people filtered out and returned to their work, William stood alone in the break room for a moment. Emily found him there, staring at her mother's photo. You did good, Dad. She'd be proud. I wasted so much time, Em. Years she tried to teach me. Years we could have had where I actually understood what mattered. You're not wasting time now. You're honoring what she taught you by living it, sharing it, making it mean something. Emily put her arm around him. That's not waste. That's legacy. William thought about that. Legacy. Not the billions in the bank or the company's market value or the awards on his wall. The real legacy, the lives changed by finally learning to see, the culture shifted by finally valuing everyone, the lesson taught by finally understanding what his wife had spent their marriage trying to show him. I still miss her every day, William said quietly. I know, but Dad, look what you built from that missing. Look what you created from that grief. You took the worst loss of your life and turned it into a lesson that's helping thousands of people. That's not nothing. That's everything Mom was trying to teach you. Later that night, William did his regular custodial shift, but this time, he wasn't alone. Emily joined him, and Rosa, and Carlos, and Jimmy, and a dozen other people from various departments who'd asked to participate. They cleaned offices together, executives and custodians, department heads and maintenance workers, the CEO and his daughter, all doing the work that kept the building running, that kept the company functioning, that enabled everyone else's success. You know what I realized, William said, mopping a floor alongside a junior accountant who'd volunteered to join the shift. This work isn't noble because I'm doing it as a CEO. It's noble because it needed doing. It's essential. It's important. And the people who do it every single day deserve recognition, not because I discovered them, but because they've always been valuable. I was just too blind to see it. The accountant nodded. I'll never walk past a custodian again without saying hello. I'll never not notice the people keeping my workspace clean. This is hard work, humbling work, important work. Exactly, William said. "That's the lesson. Everyone here matters. Everyone here contributes. Everyone here deserves to be seen." At 2 a.m., the shift ended. The building was spotless. The workers were tired but satisfied. And William Sullivan stood in the lobby of Sullivan Technologies, looking at the company directory that now listed every single employee, from CEO to newest custodian, with equal font size, equal prominence, equal respect. He thought about Catherine, about the 25 years she'd tried to teach him, about the 6 months he'd spent learning what she'd been trying to show him, about the rest of his life he'd spent honoring that lesson by living it, sharing it, and ensuring no one in his company ever felt invisible again. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty lobby, to his wife's memory, to the lesson that had cost him everything and taught him what really mattered. "Thank you for never giving up on showing me. I'm finally seeing, and I promise I'll never be blind again." The lights in the lobby flickered. Just a coincidence, probably. But William chose to see it as something else. A nod. An acknowledgement. A final message from Catherine saying she'd heard him. She was proud, and the lesson had finally been learned. William went home to his penthouse. But he wasn't alone anymore. He carried with him the stories of everyone he'd met in his 6 months of invisibility. Rosa's grace, Carlos's resilience, Jimmy's sacrifice, and Catherine's unwavering belief that he could be better than he'd been. That belief had changed everything. And William Sullivan, billionaire CEO who'd spent 6 months as a janitor, would spend the rest of his life proving that belief hadn't been misplaced. Because success, he'd finally learned, wasn't measured in billions or empires or awards. It was measured in whether you honored the humanity of every person who helped build your life. Whether you saw the invisible, whether you valued the overlooked, whether you understood that real worth had nothing to do with salary or title or position. And William Sullivan finally understood. He'd learned his lesson, and he'd never forget it. That's a lesson worth learning. That's a lesson worth living. Thanks for listening. And remember, the next time you walk past someone working a humble job, take a moment to actually see them. Learn their name if you can. Say thank you and mean it. Recognize that they're a complete human being with struggles and dreams and dignity. You never know who might be learning from your example, and you never know what lessons you might need to learn from someone society has taught you to overlook. Sometimes the wisest teachers are the ones we've been trained not to see, and sometimes the most important truths are the ones we can only learn by becoming invisible ourselves.